Okay, well, let's get started here. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. We appreciate it. My name is Dave Holman. I'm a member of No Left Turn in Education Guilford. We're sponsoring this program. So first thing we're going to do is start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, a couple of housekeeping things first. At the end of the presentation, we're going to have a question and answer period. So the protocol will be to raise your hand, and when you're acknowledged, please stand up and ask your question, and we'll try and get to everybody. Second thing is we're going to have a book signing event afterwards. So if everybody could form a line on this side, the books are $20, and KCarl has some education cards too, with quotes from Frederick Douglass, 25 in a pack, and those are going to be $25, just so you know. The third thing is, if you want to sign up to be on the No Left Turn in Education email list, we'll have sign-up sheets at the front of the room and when you leave the room. So appreciate the help if you want to join. We're fortunate to have KCarl Smith here tonight. He's the best-selling author of Frederick Douglass' Republicans, The Movement to Reignite America's Passion for Liberty. KCarl comes to us from Alabama. He's an ex-Army guy. He served for 18 years active duty. He was a member of President Trump's campaign Coalition Advisory Board, and he's the creator of Frederick Douglass Republicans Engagement Strategy. Like Frederick Douglass, he loves his country and the promise of America. Let's give KCarl a warm welcome.
Thank you so kindly. Can you hear me? Just the one? Hey, it is an honor to be here. Thank you so much. I'm honored by the fact that you're here. There could be many things you could be doing tonight. The fact that you're here, I did not take that lightly. I'm not going to belabor the point. I'm going to jump into what I want to talk to you about. But before I do that, let me tell you a little bit more about myself. I'm a native of Pine Bluff, Arkansas. 1963, my father, bless his soul, was a math genius. Let me say this now. I lost both of my parents a year and a half ago to COVID. They died 4 months apart. My mother actually died of a broken heart. They had been married for 70 years. Wow. 70 years. And based on my research, my parents didn't die of COVID. They died of the CDC protocol of using remdesivir, which shut down my parents' kidneys. So my parents were murdered. So now, because of that experience, I'm of the opinion going to the hospital is a downgrade in health care. So get your ivermectin and your oil of oregano put in the medicine cabinet. Okay? But I miss my parents dearly, so excuse me if I speak of my father in the present tense, because I still feel his presence with me. So my father went to the University of Arkansas, got his master's degree in mathematics. And then we moved from Arkansas to Huntsville, Alabama in 1964. We moved from Arkansas to Huntsville, Alabama in 1960. You're not following me. We moved from Arkansas to George Wallace country. And as a young man growing up in Alabama, I had a chance to witness some things and experience a lot of things as it pertains to racism, race relations, Jim Crow laws, things like that. I come from good stock. My father was indeed a mathematician because I have 3 brothers. All of us are 5 years apart. Because my father didn't want 2 boys in college at the same time. My oldest brother is a retired a Lieutenant Colonel in the United States Army. I'm also retired. Well, the word retirement is not in the Bible. I completed my service obligation in 1996. For my first look for Lieutenant Colonel, I decided to take my major's rank, my youth, and my pension to do something else. My brother, 5 years my junior, is a pastor for 35 years in Alabama. My youngest brother graduated from high school with a D-. Today he is a PhD physicist. It's how you start the race that matters. It's how you finish the race, right? So I indeed come from good start. My thing is messaging. My thing is messaging. And I'm a liberty advocate. I'm a liberty advocate. I'm all about liberty. I'm all about making sure every American have their God-given rights to live a life that's what they want to choose. Everybody should have that right, and that right should be protected. But what's going on in our country right now, where our God-given rights are in jeopardy. So what I want to talk to you about on how those of us who identify ourselves as conservatives can become better messengers of liberty, where we can have conversations, not confrontations. If you're a liberal here tonight, you may be a conservative before you leave here. I'm just letting you know. Because I grew up in a staunch Democrat family. I was a staunch Democrat. I'll tell you about that later. All right? Next. Of course, he mentioned I was advisor to our last president for 2 years. They brought me in to advise them on messaging. They didn't listen to anything I had to say. But it wasn't because of the president. Fundamentally, he's a decent individual. My problem I had was with the operatives of circling the president. Next slide. Do any of these situations apply to you? Next. Your family member or friend went off to college and returned home as a devout Marxist. Next slide. Your Marxist indoctrinated family and friends are calling you a racist. Next. You find yourself cut out of your grandchild's life because of your conservative values. Next. You have considered taking your Marxist indoctrinated child or grandchild out of your will. This is real stuff now. Next. You're no longer on speaking terms with your closest family members and friends. Next. You are unfriended on social media. Next. To keep the peace, you live by the rule not to discuss politics during family get-togethers. And next. We have a situation where this country where those on the left have taken over these institutions here. These social institutions are supposed to promote the American culture. The way you destroy America is destroy our institutions. So we cannot no longer depend on our education system, our government, to promote American culture. That was supposed to be the last line of defense. We can't rely on it anymore. So the question is, what is the last line of defense to defend our God-given rights? Our republic, our liberties. Next slide. The last line of defense, in my view, are conservative parents and grandparents. That's it. So conservative parents and grandparents got to become better messengers of liberty in order to awaken and educate their socialist or Marxist indoctrinated family and friends. That's how I see it. I have three children. My son, older child, is 40. My daughter's 38. I have a younger son. I have nephews in college, going off to college. And what we had to do in our family, I had to make sure that when my nephews and my nieces went off to college, they weren't going to come back as a little socialist. I had to do some things. And what I did, I put them into the writings of America's greatest liberty messenger, Frederick Douglass. And that's what I'm going to show and share with you tonight. Okay? Next slide. I don't like giving Saul Alinsky any credit, but he said something one time where he hit the nail on the head. He said, "He who controls the language controls the masses." And that's what's going on. And my point in saying this is that the left have done a masterful job of demonizing the word conservative. If we're serious about defending liberty, if we're serious about defending the Constitution, we got to understand the first thing we need to do to be effective, we got to get rid of the word conservative. Stop calling yourself that. When you tell somebody you are a conservative, you just admitted to them that you are a racist, that you are a Nazi, and that you're not even a human being. That's what they're being taught. If you tell somebody you're a black conservative, a Reagan conservative, that's what you're saying, but that's not what they're hearing. What they're hearing is that, oh, you're a black conservative, you're a black racist. You're a Reagan conservative, you're a Reagan racist. If you identify yourself as a Tea Party conservative or a constitutional conservative, now you are a racist. Because they demonize those words too. So therefore, the conservatives are on the defense. If we're going to save our nation, conservatives got to be on the offense all the time and know how to have conversations with people and not confrontations. You following? Get rid of the word conservative. I know you may not like hearing me saying this, but you got to agree with me. That word is problematic. So why are we still doing something that we know that's going to lead to failure? Don't make any sense. Now y'all looking at me like I just robbed the bank. Next slide. The word conservative has a racist connotation. I'm not here to talk about politics. I'm just going to educate you on some things, and so does the word Republican. The words have a racist connotation. So if you're a conservative, you're trying to have a conversation with someone, and you talk about truth, evidence, statistics, and facts, nobody's not going to listen to you. Because why? There's nothing a racist can tell me. Or I perceive somebody to be a racist. They have nothing to tell me. So the truth you speak doesn't matter. You follow me? Next. Shout racist and you shut conservatives down. Right? I'm here to tell you, I grew up in Alabama. The biggest racists I have ever experienced in my life are not from white conservatives, white liberals. The worst. The worst. And I want you to remember something here. I don't care what political party it is, Democrat or Republicans, racism has no political face. All the racism today is not in one party. It's in both parties. I've been in both parties. But wherever racism is, we got to fight it, face it, and fix it. Okay? Next slide. When it comes to engagement, when it comes to having a conversation, not a confrontation, 98% of conservatives fail. Because you're using the wrong word. You're calling yourself a conservative. You just lost. If we're going to save this nation and restore our republic and our God-given rights, we got to be on the offense all the time and win. Next slide. You recognize this gentleman here? Let me share this with you. I'm going to play an audio here. I don't know if it's going to come through the house speakers. If they don't come to the house speakers, I'm going to quickly key up my phone and play it through my phone. I'm going to play an audio clip here. Yeah, put that on hold. Hold that. Back up 3 times. Right there. So, I'm going to play an audio clip for you, Rush Limbaugh, during the second hour of his show. You're going to hear what he had to say. About 9 months before he made these comments, I got a call from the Rush Limbaugh show, from his executive producer. And he said, Rush asked me to call you and tell you that we're watching you. We like what you're doing. Keep it up. I want you to listen carefully what he said in 2018.
I don't like having to say this, but being honest with you and with myself is paramount. And I can tell you, and you know this without me telling you, that if conservatism and liberalism are brands, the left has succeeded in destroying the brand of conservative. All you have to say the word conservative and they think you're talking about a Nazi or a racist. Pushing conservatism is not the answer. So what I would suggest to you, when you're out and about and you're doing, if you run into an occasion where you have the opportunity to talk politics, people don't agree with you, do not use the word conservative. Do everything else, but don't call yourself that. Don't promote it. We've got a brand problem. It's time I hate it. I hate having to admit it. Get rid of it. Stop calling yourself that. Just be one. Just talk to people as one. Now, you know what I think? I think you're going to find, if we do this, that you're going to have far more people agree with your solutions than will disagree if you don't identify yourself first as a conservative and talk.
So you see that Rush Limbaugh agrees with me. I've been saying this since 2008. Rush said this back in 2018. So the question is, I hear your question. KCarl, if you're suggesting that we should stop identifying ourselves as conservatives and stop using the word, how should we identify ourselves, KCarl? I'm glad you asked the question. And I'm going to explain that answer to you by telling you my story. As I explain and share my story with you, some of you are going to see yourself in my testimony. So, several years ago, I was invited to a friend's home to watch our favorite football team play on television. There were 18 to 20 blacks who were there at this gathering. All of them were my friends. All of them were Democrats. That night, the subject of politics came up. When I shared with my friends that I was a conservative, the attacks began. One after another, they called me everything but a child of God. Uncle Tom, foot shuffler, the house N-word. Your parents must be disappointed in you. You're a sellout to your community. How could you do such a thing? All that's not true, but they started attacking me. Their insults ran the gamut. I went home that night thinking and mostly praying about how can I share my conservative values and be on the offense and have a conversation without the fear of racial name calling. How can I win this narrative? How can I trump this race card, pun intended? So after several months, over a year of reading and research, the aha moment came when I created the Frederick Douglass Liberty Message Engagement Strategy. A year later, I invited those same 18 to 20 black Democrat friends to my home to watch a football game. And reluctantly, they came. And that night, the subject of politics surfaced once again. And they said, okay, Carl, he's a conservative. I said, wait a minute. I'm more than a conservative. I'm a Frederick Douglass Liberty Ambassador. I'm a Frederick Douglass messenger. And I embrace the life-empowering values of Frederick Douglass. Respect for the U.S. Constitution. Respect for life. I believe in the limited power of government, economic prosperity, free speech, school choice, parental choice when it comes to education, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, religious liberty, legal immigration, women's rights as it pertains to women's suffrage. When I shared that with them, all of my friends started talking about how they were a Frederick Douglass Liberty Ambassador as well, or Frederick Douglass Liberty Messenger. For the first time in my life, I had the confidence, the knowledge, and the skill to have conversations with people who may not agree with me and inspire them to vote their values. Before you leave here tonight, if you want to or not, you're going to know how to engage. You're going to know how to have conversations with people and not confrontations. Okay? Next slide. Keep on going. There'll be some audio here. Go. Keep on. Next. You recognize her? Alveda King? Yeah. I want, that may not play, because I don't think we hook up to the Wi-Fi. I got it on my phone here. A lot of people talk about Dr. Martin Luther King. I just want to cover this because we just finished Black History Month. A lot of people keep saying that Dr. King was a Republican. That's not true. I want to play this audio for you where she says that. And she says something else at the end. This is about 40 seconds long.
When we consider the King family legacy, it's much more spiritual than political. Of course, people always want to know if Martin Luther King Jr. was a Democrat or a Republican. Well, actually, he was an independent. His dad, Martin Luther King Sr., was a Republican who voted for President John Kennedy, a Democrat, during the time that Martin Luther King Jr. was incarcerated. And Granddaddy needed help from Washington to get his son out of jail. And he said, I'll vote. There was a suitcase of votes to whoever gets my son out of jail. That ended up being President John Kennedy, who was reluctant, but his brother Bobby Kennedy says, help him. President Nixon said, I want to help him. His advisor said, don't help him. And so President Kennedy was credited to helping Martin Luther King Jr. be released from jail and won the vote of Daddy King. However, Daddy King was a staunch Republican much of his life. Martin Luther King Jr. said, Dixiecrats, Republicans, Democrats, I may have to speak to any of them at any time, and so I will be an independent. I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican. I've been a Democrat, an independent, and a Republican, but I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican.
Where do you think she got that phrase from? I'm a Frederick Douglass. Yours truly. Okay? In lieu of saying I'm a conservative, what we teach is, I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican, I'm a Frederick Douglass Liberty Messenger, I'm a Frederick Douglass Liberty Ambassador. The focus is Frederick Douglass. Next, please. Next one. 71%, this was an ABC News poll that came out in January of this year. 71% of Americans believe the U.S. is on the wrong track. 71% of an ABC News poll. What's that telling me is that 71% of Americans believe that the direction towards socialism is the wrong track. So as a conservative now, 71% of Americans agree with us. The problem is we don't know how to get our message to resonate with them. You follow me? That's the problem. We don't have a message problem, we have a messaging problem. Next slide. Next slide. So this Frederick Douglass Republican engagement strategy, this Frederick Douglass Republican Liberty Messenger strategy that I came up with, it is not of human origin. It was not given to me by any man, nor was I taught it. I received it by divine revelation from God. This is not a gimmick. This is not some cheap magician's trick. God gave me this. So for the past 15 years, I've been traveling the country, and I've been purposely going out preaching to those who want to listen, but also preaching to the conservative choir, teaching them how to become better messengers of liberty, and teaching them a new song, and teaching them how to go out and bring in more diverse members for the choir. and give them a new song called the Frederick Douglass Republican or the Frederick Douglass Liberty Melody. You got to fix it up a little bit. Hymns are okay, you just can't sing hymns all the time. Next slide. The Frederick Douglass Republican disengagement strategy is based on the liberty message of Frederick Douglass and the diversity outreach strategy of the Apostle Paul. When you really think about it, the Apostle Paul was a diversity outreach specialist. If you recall now, the Apostle Paul was called by God and commissioned by God to take the gospel to what? To whom? The Gentiles. People of different what? Different ethnicities, different races, right? Follow me now. By occupation, the Apostle Paul, he was attorney and he was a tent maker. Am I right? God called the Apostle Paul to establish a big tent. Big tent is a metaphoric expression for diversity outreach. What do conservatives say all the time? We got to have a what? Big tent. Next slide. How to improve the conservative brand. Stop using the word conservative. Get rid of that word. If we're going to save this nation, we got to be able to resonate with all Americans, young people, brown people, Hispanic people, old women. If we want this message of conservatism, which you're going to stop using, if we want this message of liberty to resonate, we got to stop using a word that causes the problem. That word's been demonized by the left. It has a racist connotation. And also, here, I got to get this to you. Well, go to the next one. Let's skip this one. Next one. I'm not going to get into the politics. This is a chart I used earlier today. I'm not going to talk politics. I'm going to stick with talking about philosophy. Next one. Next. Racism has no political face. Let me share this with you. I owe this to you. Why does the word conservative have a racist connotation? It's not just because of propaganda being destroyed by the left. How much time I got? You better put me on a clock.
We got till 9 o'clock.
What time is it now?
7:30.
Oh, I'm not going to be here that long. And y'all should be grateful for that, right? When my friends attacked me that night, when I mentioned I was a conservative, I said, why are they wearing me out about this word conservative? Is there anything in history that will help me understand why this word conservative, why does it have a racist connotation? I don't have a PhD, but I've done some PhD level research I want to share with you. Let's go back to 1964. That's when President Lyndon B. Johnson, July 2nd, he signed the civil rights legislation into law. Okay? If you recall, your racist Democrat senators, the Dixiecrats, primarily from the South, they filibustered the bill and voted against it based on racist reasons. I was in Alabama. You follow me? They voted against it, the Democrats did, based on racist reasons. There was a certain Republican senator who also voted against the legislation. Not because he was a racist. Senator Barry Goldwater voted against the bill based on constitutional grounds. Robert Bork was a Yale University professor. He wrote a 75-page opinion that Goldwater used to form his decision to vote against the civil rights legislation of 1964. Senator Barry Goldwater was not a racist. He was indeed an integrationist. In 1953, it was Senator Barry Goldwater who integrated the Senate cafeteria in our nation's capital when one of his black staffers was refused service. It was Senator Barry Goldwater at the age of 37. He was the first business owner in Phoenix, Arizona to hire black cashiers. And Goldwater went around the city of Phoenix encouraging other business owners to integrate their companies. Senator Barry Goldwater founded the Arizona Air National Guard as an integrated unit before Truman integrated the armed forces. Senator Barry Goldwater was not a racist. He was an integrationist. But with his no vote, he sided with the racists. You follow me? I'm going to connect two dots here. You got to get this. What was Senator Goldwater's nickname? His nickname was Mr. Conservative. What was the book he wrote in 1960 that sold over 3 million copies? The Conscience of a Conservative. Now, at the 1964 Republican Party National Convention that was held at the Cal Palace in San Francisco, the Republican Party, the party of Lincoln, the party of emancipation, who do they nominate as their presidential candidate to run against Johnson? Barry Goldwater. When that happened, black folks left the Republican Party en masse. My parents were staunch Republicans until 1964. When I did my research, I said, Dad, what happened? He said, son, the Republican Party didn't want us. And the Democrat Party was worse. So black folks became politically homeless. Then all of Dr. King's lieutenants became Democrats. I was growing up in Alabama at that time. I can recall hearing the word Republican, conservative, Goldwater, and racist used in the same sentence. I said, that's it. I said, oh my God, that's it. That's when the word conservative started to become culturally ingrained in the black community to mean racist. The word conservative is not the language of liberty in the black community. It's the language of oppression. Don't shoot the messenger. Matter of fact, I tell my 11-year-old son, I said, don't believe anything I'm telling you. I said, I'm not going to lie to you, but you make sure you question everything I say. You analyze everything that comes through your ear. I don't care if it's your teacher, your professor, your mother, or me. You learn to be a critical thinker and put stuff on check. I'm going to say that to you tonight. Prove me wrong. Don't go get some revisionist version of history. Give me the truth, right? Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next. I don't talk about that. All right. So here's the irony of this thing. Now, I'm growing up in Alabama. I grew up a staunch Democrat, right? I said, Lord, I didn't know my history. When I started reading Frederick Douglass, my thinking turned right side up. Quick class on Frederick Douglass, quickly. Born 1818 in the Eastern Shores area of Maryland, the way I like to put it, Frederick Douglass was born below poverty. See, when you're born into slavery, you're born below poverty. Douglass was a slave for the first 20 years of his life. Never owned a pair of shoes until he was 8 years old. Never slept in bed to age 10. It was against the law to teach blacks how to read and write. Douglass started his own homeschooling program while he was a slave boy on a plantation. In my view, Frederick Douglass is America's greatest liberty messenger. And he's the forgotten prophet when it comes to liberty. Fast forward a little bit, Douglass escaped from slavery in 1838 at the age of 20. Here's some tidbits I want to share with you about Douglass's life that many of you probably don't even know. Frederick Douglass wrote 3 autobiographies. He's the only person in history that I know that has 3 autobiographies, right? And he wrote a novel called The Heroic Slave. Frederick Douglass was an advisor. Now, consider this now. He had 0 days of formal schooling. Never been to school in his life, all homeschooled. He was an advisor to 5 presidents, 5 Republican presidents. Because what? The Democrats won't have anything to do with him. I'm just keeping it real, right? Who were they? Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant, James Garfield, Rutherford Hayes, and Benjamin Harrison. Trivia question. And George, you can't answer this. I know you know the answer. Frederick Douglass passed away in 1895. Court, you can't answer. Kurt, Eric, you can't answer either. Frederick Douglass passed away in 1895 at the age of 77. He died of a massive heart attack. How much money do you think Douglass had in savings at the time of his death? Yes.
No guess. $5,000.
$5,000. That's this side. 100,000 in the back. 300,000. Right here.
I don't think he had much.
Somebody had nothing. Why you say nothing? Because he was a slave for 20 years and he get paid.
No, because he was probably a philanthropist.
Why you say 300,000? Because you know he right. Doug had $300,000 in savings back then. Today, that's over $30 million. That's Douglas's life. His life is inspiring. Reason why his life is inspiring, no one today can out-victimize Frederick Douglass. Your excuses go away. He taught himself how to play the violin. I'm teaching myself how to play electric guitar. He spoke 3 different languages. I'm still stuck on Ebonics. That's the life of Douglass. But what I really want to share with you tonight is the literary legacy of Douglass. Douglass, next slide. I get to it. Next slide. Next. I already mentioned this. America's greatest liberty messenger and forgotten prophet. What Frederick Douglass said about liberty and the U.S. Constitution is more important what any of the founding fathers had to say. That's blasphemy, KCarl. Young man, that's heresy. How could you say such a thing like that? Let me prove my point. The founders, they gave us 2 magnificent documents. The Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. You follow me? Some of the founders owned slaves. So when it comes to liberty, the founders are tainted. And the left exploits that. These racist men who own slaves give us this racist document called the Constitution, therefore we should shred it up. Right? Yeah, that's what they say. On the other hand, Frederick Douglass didn't own his slaves. He was a slave. Frederick Douglass wasn't a racist. He was a victim of racism. But in his speeches and in his writings, Frederick Douglass affirmed the founding fathers and he affirmed the Constitution. And those who want to shred the Constitution don't have an answer for that. They don't have an answer for Douglass. Let me give you an example. Douglass said this about the Constitution one time. He said, quote, "The Constitution reads, we the people. It does not read, we the white people." He went on to say, if black folks are considered to be people, they should be benefactors of the Constitution. Douglass concluded by saying, the problem is not with the Constitution. The problem is in the application of the Constitution. You follow me? I'm a graduate of Historical Black College, Alabama A&M University. I was taught, and it's still being taught today, I was taught in college that the Constitution was a pro-slavery document, in particular because it has a reference to the 3/5 clause. I was taught that the 3/5 clause meant that blacks are 3/5 of a human being. How many of you have heard that? How many of you have been taught that? How many of y'all believe that? 1860, Douglass in Glasgow, Scotland. He was in a debate. It was Frederick Douglass when I started reading the writings of Douglas, who gave clarity to the 3/5 clause. Douglas said the 3/5 clause has nothing to do with the personhood of a black individual. He said it was a compromise approach used by the northern free states upon the southern slave states. Because here's what's going on. In the Constitution, it reads that for every 30,000 citizens, you get one congressional representation. The slave states tried to count, or wanted to count, every black person in slavery. They weren't going to free them. They wanted to count every black person in slavery as one person, one vote, which would have boosted their representation. You had like 4 million blacks in slavery in the South. That would give the slave states a huge majority in Congress. So the northern free states said, if you free them, we'll let you count them as one person, one vote. But since you can't free them, you don't want to free them, we'll let you count the slave population as 3/5 of a vote. Meaning that a black person in a free state is worth 5/5 of a vote, and a black person in a slave state is only worth 3/5 of a vote in terms of representation of power. When I read that of Doug, I said, oh, God. I said, what else have I been lied to about? That brother turned my thinking right side up. Next slide. With this engagement strategy I'm sharing with you, I'm not worried about this. I'm a former Army officer. I have a command voice. But I'm losing my voice because I've been talking the whole week. With this engagement strategy I'm sharing with you, we have a 98% success rate of engaging people, having conversations, and not a confrontation. Let me give you an example how this worked one time. So I live outside the city of Birmingham, a city called Trustville. And as being on the board advising our last president, I had to fly to DC one time for a board meeting. So when I fly Delta normally, I got to leave Birmingham to Atlanta to go up to DC for my connecting flight. Well, I'm in Atlanta airport. I'm just telling you the story. I had on my Trump cap. Black man in the Atlanta airport wearing a Trump cap. Now, my cap didn't have Make America Great on it. My cap had the presidential seal on it, Trump 45 on the bib, and Trump 45 on the back of the cap. See, the reason why I didn't wear the Make America Great cap, because I'm trying to have a conversation with people, not a confrontation. So right across in front of me, like you and I now, there were 3 members of BLM. They had the t-shirt on. They're going to DC too. We exchanged eye contact. I looked at them, they looked at me. I looked at them, they looked at me. I looked at them, and I said, how do you like my cap? I got to get the conversation going. Let me tell you why I did that. I'm trying to help you out here. If you ever find yourself in a bad neighborhood, and you're not from that neighborhood, and you see 6 or 7 guys clustering around, and you start thinking about your health and welfare, what you need to do first, you need to go over to them, ask them for 50 cents before they come and see if you got any money. I'm trying to help you out. You got to beat them to the punch, right? I'm laughing to point into you that I had to initiate the conversation. And they said to me, oh, you support President Trump. I responded by giving a quote from Frederick, and I said, I will unite with anybody who wants to do right and nobody who wants to do wrong. The conversation quickly shifted to the U.S. Constitution. And they're talking about how the Constitution is a pro-slavery document, and they start referring to the 3/5 clause. I shared with them what Douglas said about the 3/5 clause. They said, we never knew that. We had an exchange, we had a dialogue. We had a conversation. Was I able to impart some kind of knowledge on them or to help awaken them? Because remember now, they're trained Marxists. They told me that. They never heard the liberty message based on the writings of Frederick Douglass. And guess what? Each of them bought a copy of my book. follow me? Next slide. To be a Frederick Douglass Liberty Messenger, it's not about color, it's about values. What are those values that make you a Frederick Douglass Liberty Messenger or Frederick Douglass Ambassador or, as Alveda said, a Frederick Douglass Republican? Let's go through them quickly. Respect for the U.S. Constitution, click it. It should go through automatically. Respect for life, the belief in limited power of government. You see it there. Personal responsibility, economic prosperity, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, free speech, religious liberty, women's rights in terms of women's suffrage. I haven't found anywhere where Douglass talked about abortion. That was not the issue in the day. Parental school choice, immigration, and a right to vote. These are what we call the life-empowering values of Douglass. To be a Frederick Douglass Liberty Ambassador or Frederick Douglass Liberty Messenger, it's not based on color. It's based on these values. So if you agree with these values, guess what? You're a Frederick Douglass Liberty Ambassador. You have to agree with all of them. This is how we're going to unite America. Most Americans agree with this. We got to stop focusing on what we have different opinions about, focus on what we agree with, make this thing better. And we got to start having conversations with people who have a different opinion. Don't you know Dr. King, MLK, used to meet with members of the KKK on weekends? We can't avoid having a conversation. All right, next slide. These life-empowering values of Douglass, in my view, are the common ground that most Americans agree with. Okay? I've been all over the country, different venues. I've been black churches, white churches, the hood, Latino community. You name it, they agree with those values. Well, guess what? Why Douglass is so powerful? Because Frederick Douglass is, in my view, the ideal embodiment of those values. He wrote about them. When you leverage what a former slave had to say about those values, it resonates. How can you win an argument with a runaway slave about his admiration for the founding fathers and the U.S. Constitution and free speech? Douglass was in Boston. How much time I got? Somebody?
25.
Okay. Douglass was in Boston. He gave a speech entitled A Plea for Free Speech in Boston. And Douglass said this, quote, "Tyrants cannot tolerate free speech because they know the power of it. Anybody that opposes free speech on college campuses are tyrants, according to Douglass. Why? What's the power of free speech? If I have the right to free speech and you are oppressing me, I can tell the world about it and we can put an end to it. But tyrants don't want free speech because they want to oppress you and want to oppress you while you're silent. Follow me? Thank God we got this literary legacy of Douglass to help us understand what's going on in our country now. Because I'll share this with you. I learned this by reading Douglass. The techniques of oppression used by the plantation slave master to make black people slaves are the same techniques of oppression used by the same government to make all of us slaves. And Douglass said the first thing that the oppressor does is to separate a man and a woman from God. Socialism and God cannot coexist. Why? If I'm the oppressor and I want to oppress you, I got to make sure that you don't view anything of a higher authority above me. I got to remove this higher authority. I got to remove God so you just rely on me. Thank God Douglass wrote about this. When I read this, oh my God, this brother is a philosopher. So when Douglass started speaking on the abolitionist movement, he was hired to tell this story. Then Douglass one day started becoming more philosophical. And William Lloyd Garrison and some of Douglass's colleagues who were speaking with him, they said, wait a minute, Douglass. Douglass, we don't want you, we don't need you to be philosophical. Just tell your story. Douglass said, I got something to say. Douglass said, I can think. I can give a perspective you can't give. I got the lash. It'll be wise of us as liberty advocates, I'm not saying conservative anymore, as liberty advocates to get into the liberty message of Frederick Douglass and learn how to articulate it, where we can make it resonate to people about the importance of liberty. Get rid of that word conservative. Throw it out. It's a problem. Next slide. I talked about that next one. Most people, I said this before, most people indoctrinated into Marxism have never been introduced to America's greatest writer, thinker, and speaker, Frederick Douglass, and his liberty message. I see this happen all over the place. And when they hear it, the message of Douglass, awakening takes place. You can't call him a racist. He was a victim of racism. He wasn't a slave owner, he was a slave. You following? It resonates. I'm here to tell you, those who embrace Marxism, they have no answer for him. And they never will. And as we grow this liberty movement, I'm here to tell you, as we grow this liberty movement, they got the left got to go back to France. Take that mess with them. Next slide. I'm going to contrast these individuals here. You see who they are. Frederick Douglass and Karl Marx. You got to decide. When I was talking to some high school kids and college kids, it was after school program, I said, you got to decide who you're going to follow. Let me quickly contrast the lives of Frederick Douglass and Karl Marx. They're in the ring. They're in the fight for the world dominance. On the left is Karl Marx. On the right is Frederick Douglass. Next point. Both of these gentlemen were born in 1818. Karl Marx really never had a real job in his life. His father was a lawyer. He married into money. He had a rich uncle that helped take care of him. And his business partner, Engels, helped him out financially. On the other hand, Douglass, 1818, born into slavery. You follow me? Next slide. Karl Marx became a theorist about oppression. Frederick Douglass had real life experiences about oppression. You follow me? Next. Karl Marx was a revolutionist. Let's tear everything up. Shred the Constitution, start over, and put us in charge. Well, the devil is a liar. Frederick Douglass, in his third autobiography, he said, quote, I'm not a revolutionist. I am a reformer. Meaning that let's keep the best that we have, including the Constitution, and make things better. Douglass said, just live up to the letter of the Constitution. Stop playing mischief and games with it, and favoritism with it. That kind of thing. All right, next slide. Douglass believed in personal responsibility, and he also believed in God-given rights. Karl Marx in his writings believed in government dependency, and Karl Marx didn't believe in no God-given rights. Not at all. Next slide. Next. So what do you have? Liberty versus slavery. This is a compelling slide. When I talk to young people to get them having an awakening, this is a slide that does it. Because you got to choose. Next slide. Frederick Douglassism is the most effective liberty message to defeat Marxism. And you saw why. Next slide. Next. I was on David Barton's show. Next. Liberty Message Boot Camp. Now I'm wrapping this thing up. So, next slide. I need you. America need you to become Frederick Douglass Liberty Messengers. If you have a problem with anything I said tonight, research it. Prove me wrong. Because we're in a fight for liberty. We're in a fight for our God-given rights. I don't like what I see is happening in our school system. They're corrupting our children. We must protect the innocence of our children. When they get 20 years old, they figure out what they want to do. Don't corrupt my child. And stop hiding from parents what you're doing in the schools. Amen. That's evil. And we got the same thing in Alabama. But I don't care if you don't agree with me, it doesn't matter. I'm going to stand my ground, because my thing is this. I'm not a slave to a party. I'm a slave to the God I serve. Matter of fact, there's a quote from Robert Brown Elliott. He said on one occasion, Robert Brown Elliott was one of the first 7 blacks to serve in U.S. Congress. He said, I'm not a slave to any party. I'm a slave to principles. I'm not a slave to the Republican Party or the Democrat Party. I'm a slave to the God I serve. And I'm going to vote in a way and carry myself in a way that shows my love and my allegiance to the God I say I serve. Not to the government, not to a political party. So, I knew I was coming to Connecticut, and some folks won't agree. I don't care. I'm telling the truth. They can't stand the truth. Let me share something with you. I got to show you this. Anybody that embrace infanticide will do anything. You know what I'm talking about? Yes. Will do anything. They will lie and continue to lie. Let me prove my point. You can do this homework. I wasn't going to talk. I'm going to educate you about some things here. I want you to go to the Democrat Party's website. I'm a former Democrat now, staunch. You can't talk about the Democrat Party. I know about it. I was in it, thick. Go to the Democrat Party's website, democrats.org. Now, understand too, the Republican Party is bad. Democrat Party is just worse. Okay? Republican Party got some issues too. Because what happened in 1964, the Republican Party made the Democrat Party look like heroes to black folks. That's why blacks became Democrats. Black folks did not become Democrats because of food stamps. They were kicked out of the Republican Party. That's what happened. It was made people look homeless. Democrats.org, go to their website. Go down to the bottom of the website where it says Our History. When you click Our History on Democrats.org, it will take you to their Our History page. On their Our History page, the first part of the first sentence reads, quote, for more than 200 years, we have led the fight for civil rights. That's been on their website since 2013. It's still up there because I checked it coming in this morning. Now, let's take this now. 200 years ago, 2023, it was 1823. Frederick Douglass was born in 1818. In 1853, Douglass gave a speech called the Slavery Party. See, this is why Douglass is important now, because we got this literary legacy of Douglass to refute the lies and the false rhetoric of the left. They can't stand it. Douglass said this, go up a few slides, I'll tell you when to stop. Douglass said this in 1818, go up, not that way, the other way. He said, quote, the best representation, keep on going. Douglass, keep on, keep on, I'll tell you to stop. The best representation of slavery in politics is the Democrat Party. Quote from Frederick Douglass. I said, oh my God. Folk can't stand, hold on, go back. That's the picture of the website back in 2013. See what's in the box there? For more than 200 years, our party led the fight for civil rights. Go to the next slide. That's the website now. See what it says there? For more than 200 years, our party led the fight for civil rights. We need more people to be truth tellers. I don't care if you got an R behind your name or a D. Be a truth teller. Next slide. Next. Quote. All right, here's what Douglass said. Hit it. Read it. There is in this country a purely slavery party, a party which exists for no other purpose, earthly purpose, but to promote the interests of slavery. For the present, the best representative of slavery in politics is the Democrat Party. End of quote. I'm going to drop the mic. What's your questions? I bought some books here. I wrote this whole engagement strategy into a book that came out in 2011. It's entitled Frederick Douglass Republicans, The Movement to Reignite America's Passion for Liberty. It's not a dissertation on the political thoughts of Douglas. It is a Liberty Messenger's handbook. It's a conservative messenger handbook, if you will. It teaches you how to engage, what word to say, what word not to say. It teaches about Douglas's life, how to leverage Douglas's liberty message and be effective when it comes to engaging. I have some books here. The book comes with 5 engagement cards on the back. It's a quote from Frederick Douglass about those 12 life empowering values. This is the card you pass out to people so they can have an awakening. Okay? I have some books here. The books are free. The autograph in each book is $20. I'm a free market entrepreneur. What can I say? What are your questions? Yes, sir.
However we choose to identify ourselves going forward, don't you think the Democrats will just vilify, that,
They're going to vilify you anyway. I don't care what you use. But at least with Frederick, the question is, however you identify yourself, I hope it's with Frederick Douglass in there, the opposition is going to come in and vilify you. But at least with Frederick Douglass, you got his literary legacy to stand with. You can pull from it. The left had not gotten to a point to rewrite his speeches yet. They rewrote history, okay? But haven't gotten to a point to rewrite Douglass. We got to recapture that. All right, question.
I just want to encourage everybody to sign up with no left turn, because we're looking at forming what we'll call the Frederick Douglass Society in Gilbert, and it won't be your stay-home kind of society. Okay, we'll be planning various activities, how to penetrate the educational system, and other projects that carry this message forward. Will hopefully fix the mess that's in front of us. So definitely sign up. Thank you.
Yeah. I want to hear your questions. I don't want to hear your statements. But I got him in the back first, man. Yeah.
You've referenced.
I don't know what you're saying. I can't figure it out.
You've referenced Marxism numerous times, but I don't think you explained what it is. Can you explain what Marxism is in your view?
I can point to it better than I can explain it to you. I don't like the fact that when my God-given rights is controlled by the state, my God-given rights come from God. When that is in conflict, that's a problem for me. That's what I look at. I'm worried about my rights, my children's rights. My right to control the education of my child, not the government. That's how I look at it. I'm not going to get into the economic part of it. That's what I look at. I'm concerned about rights. Without that, we have nothing. Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
How you doing?
I want to say thank you for educating us.
Yes, ma'am.
Frederick Douglass took the victim mentality and put it aside
Yes,
forever.
you got it.
And
You got it.
and when you got called by Rush's producer, was that James Golden or Bo Snerdley?
That was not James. James Golden was the screen
Or
guy.
Bo Snerdley?
It was somebody else.
Okay, because
Yeah.
Bo does
Bo does
radio
screen
in-
calls. Yeah.
He does radio in New York, very
Yes,
inspirational.
yes.
And one of I'm a regular caller to him. He's one of my biggest supporters.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Let me say something about CRT. My understanding, I got through my brother. My brother has a PhD from Vanderbilt University. I sat down with a gentleman, a doctor from Vanderbilt. I said, explain to me CRT. He said to me, when this critical race theory was taught in law school, all it was an academic critique on how racism was used to formulate laws, the Jim Crow law, for example. He said to me, it's been hijacked. He said, most people teaching the critical race theory in your school not even qualified to teach it. And he said what they've done, they're teaching divisiveness. He said, that's not critical race theory. But that's what they teach to our children. He said critical race theory was all about teaching the both sides of history, good and bad, without doing it divisively. You don't need to separate white and black kids to teach critical race theory. Well, that's what they're doing. It's been hijacked, he said. Now, I'm in Vermont. Lord have mercy for Vermont. And so there's a couple, when you look at what's been taught to our children, and I'm talking to high schoolers all the time, they're telling me, I don't feel good about my color, he's white. Or I'm black, so I'm a victim the rest of my life. So I'm in Vermont speaking. After I spoke, a white liberal reporter came up to me. He said, what's wrong with telling black kids that they're victims? I said, what you say? What's wrong with telling black kids that they are victims? Look at what's going on socially and economically. I said, so you're telling me when I get up in the morning and get my son dressed and feed him and take him to school and drive him to school, and as he gets out of the car, I should tell my son, baby, don't forget, work hard today, baby, and don't forget, honey, you're a victim. There goes ambition. There goes a work ethic. Now you got to depend on somebody else to take care of you. The devil is a lie. I said, that's what you tell your child? So why I got to tell my child? So Douglas addressed this issue about treating black folks like they're a special class of citizens. I'm talking about this social engineering. All social engineering is treating black folks like we're social guinea pigs. Douglas in Boston, and Doug said in his speech, he said, stop treating black folks like they're a special class of citizens. He said, leave them alone. Your interference is causing him positive injury. He said, you didn't do anything special for the Irish. Doug said, leave them alone. Treat them fair but no favor. Because then they asked Douglas one time, because about 4 million blacks have been free from slavery, right? They asked Douglas, what shall we do with the Negro? These 4 million blacks can be free because they want to take care of black folks, right? What shall we do with the Negro? Doug said, what you mean, what shall you do with the Negro? Don't you think you've done enough? You made him a slave. Douglas said, quote, leave him alone and mind your own business. Give him his rights and leave him alone. Don't treat us like we're second-class citizens because of our past enslavement. We're not victims, we're more than conquerors. Douglas saw himself as a conqueror, not a victim. See, if I'm a victim, I got to depend on white liberals to take care of me. That's a slave master mentality. But if I'm more than a conqueror, I can go get it for myself. Go back and read Uncle Tom's Cabin. I read it twice, the one of the boys reading in my life. When you go back and read, I know it's not a true story, but she says something in that book that made me think, that's how white liberals think. Remember in the first part of the book, the slave master was coming on some tough times economically. He was going to sell Uncle Tom and sell the boy, separate the boy from his mother who worked in the house, and separate them, sell Tom and the little boy. And so the slave master's in the front room talking to the slave trader. And then when the wife found out that her husband's going to sell Tom, she said, why are you going to sell Tom? Tom has been good for us. And she came later on and said, she said, quote, the fool of me. I thought that my benevolence and instruction to my slaves were better than giving them liberty. They don't want us to have liberty. They want to take care of us. Leave us the hell alone. That's what leave us alone. Let God provide. And I've been on both sides now. I'm 65 years old. I'm not a spring chicken. So I've got to make sure that my children understand their God-given rights. Understand what their gifts are. When you help your child understand their God-given gifts, their God-given talents, they can take that obsession and make it a profession. All right, make a question for you. Yes, sir. I got you over here next.
So President Lincoln didn't go into the Civil War with the intention of freeing slaves.
Exactly right.
He went in with the intention of saving the Union.
That's right.
Okay. he did not, he was, basically, he grew up in a place where he never ran into black people out there.
That's right.
In Illinois. So
Right.
he didn't know anything about it. What did Frederick Douglass do to educate that man?
All right, very good question. The question is, Abraham Lincoln, when you read Abraham Lincoln's first inaugural address, he supported slavery in the South. Lincoln wasn't about ready to free the slaves. Matter of fact, when Abraham Lincoln gave that speech, Douglas wrote an editorial and cut Lincoln up. Lincoln believed, when you read his debates with Stephen Douglas, Lincoln believed that black folks were intellectually inferior to whites until he met Frederick Douglass. Lincoln and Douglass were not friends, but they knew they had to work together. They understood they had a nation to save. So by them working together, they had developed mutual respect for one another. Douglass met Lincoln on 3 different occasions. One time he met with Lincoln, the first time he met with Lincoln, he went in to see Lincoln to argue the point that black soldiers were not getting equal pay as the white soldiers. The second time they met, Lincoln called Douglass in because Lincoln at that time was concerned that the North, the Union, was going to lose the war. And he brought Lincoln in to come up with an escape plan for the slaves. Then he met Lincoln a third time at Lincoln's second inaugural reception. The story goes that Douglass had this invitation to go to the inaugural reception. That's the day after Lincoln gave his inaugural address the second time. Douglass had a difficult time getting in. They only don't let black folks in. But Douglass managed to get in. Lincoln's about, 6'5". Douglass was also tall. But Lincoln saw Douglass at a distance and said, my friend, Frederick Douglass, come here. And it was a crowded ballroom, right? He walks up to Douglass and they met. And he said to Douglass, what do you think? What did you think of my speech today? Because he said that because the last time he gave a speech 4 years ago, Douglass cut him up. And Douglass said it was a sacred moment. So they didn't mind having a dialogue. Dr. King met with members of the KKK on weekends. They didn't mind having a dialogue. That's what's missing in our country. There's some people don't want to hear a diversity of thought. They don't want a dialogue because their argument is weak. They want to shut up. They want to shut down and cut out the conservative tongue. The way you get your tongue back is through Frederick Douglass. And let them run with that. They don't have an answer for it. None whatsoever. I saw a hand over here. Makes sense to you?
Yeah.
All right.
KCarl, John, how are you?
Hey, John.
I'm so glad I came here tonight. I feel blessed. I love this message, and I think I'm a Frederick Douglass Liberty messenger. Yeah.
That's right.
I ask you a question, though.
Yes, sir.
You said you tried to get this messaging out with the Trump administration.
He wasn't the only one.
What was the hold? Why couldn't they grab onto this?
The problem was with the operatives, these political operatives. And what I come to understand is that if you can't, they get paid to strategize, to come up with successful strategies, and they're losing. They're not doing anything. But if an idea comes up that you did not create or control, you're going to make sure it doesn't go forward because you may get written out of the budget. That's exactly what's going on. Trump wasn't the problem. The people around him wouldn't let the message come clear what I had to say to him. And I'm going to share this with you. You got to get this. So I told them, I said, look, y'all don't get it. Whew. So I was advising them how to come up with a unified message that would resonate with everybody. Not just blacks, but everybody. But in particular, they asked me, how are we going to resonate with people of color? Their strategy was, let's just market all the great things the president's done. Let's talk about criminal justice reform. Let's talk about how he increased funding in historical black colleges and extended the funding. Let's talk about all-time unemployment of the black community. I said, that's not enough. I said to them, you got to understand through which biblical lens that people, especially black people who vote Democrat, how they view the world. And I'm talking about myself here. The way I view the world, and many others view the world, is through Proverbs 21:1. Meaning that it says that the heart of the king is in the hands of God. Meaning that God is almighty. He can take a quote-unquote racist president. President Trump's not racist, but they generalize as Republicans considered to be racist, right? Fundamentally, I think he's a decent human being. But God being almighty, he can take the heart of a racist president and use him to bless me. Unemployment all-time low in the black community. Promote justice for him. So Trump's not going to get the credit. God's going to get the credit because why? God made the racists do it. You follow me? That's why I tried to explain. You got to do more than that. And so they just didn't listen. So I just packed my bags, keep on going. I got called by a campaign down in Georgia. They had that race. The runoff was in December, right? They called me September. Can you help? I'm not helping y'all. You called me too late. You want to call me at the 11th hour, ask me to help. You want to punk me just to get the black vote. I'm not doing it. You're not serious. You're not sincere. And so I got to make sure I protect what God has given me. I'm not going to play games. I don't play games with the Republican Party. I call them out all the time. Because I want our nation to improve. And we got too much divisiveness. And don't forget, racism has no political face. They want to think that all the racism in politics is in the Republican Party. That ain't true. They're in the Democrat Party too. Whatever it is, we got to face it, fight it, and fix it. All right? That's what we got to do. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
How do we, like, for example, I agree with you on many things. I disagree with you on many things. I am not particularly far right, but if I mention even one thing that is quote-unquote conservative, say I support the Second Amendment, that people would automatically group me, you, everyone in this room in the same group as Nazis and Ku Klux Klan members, all the bad guys. How do we separate the reasonable conservative Frederick Douglass beliefs we have from those beliefs?
By leveraging the quote from Frederick Douglass. First of all, stop using the word conservative, because you're not going to win once you start that. You're already on the defense. You're not going to win. You got to leverage what Frederick Douglass had to say. I agree with what Douglass said. That's what you're saying. So what are they going to do, call Douglass a racist? They call Douglass a sellout? They're going to question what a former slave had to say? That's all I'm saying. I agree with what that man believed in. You got to stand with Douglass. You got to put Douglass on your team. You got to give Douglass the ball. You ain't got to call any special plays. Just give him the ball and get the hell out of the way. Let Douglass' literary legacy run. The problem is we haven't leveraged that. Because people don't see Douglass as a major thought leader when it comes to the U.S. Constitution, when it comes to human rights. You can't be a more greater expert on human rights than Frederick Douglass, a man who was a slave. You can't do it. He wrote about it. Douglass said on one occasion, listen to this now, listen, and I agree with this. Douglass said, I'm not a patriot first of America. He said, I'm a patriot of humanity first. See what I'm saying? Because sometimes America didn't get it right. I'm a patriot of humanity. Whew. That brother turned my thinking right side up. Questions? Yes, sir?
Can I ask an old one?
Yeah.
Right here in Guilford, it's like ground zero for CRT.
Guilford is?
Yeah, it really is. Our Board of Education says they're not teaching it, but they are. They're hiring coaches. Coaches admit in the meetings that they're following Kendi Ingram's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. And one of the big things this guy says in his book is that there's systematic racism in the United States. And I don't know if I believe that. I believe it was. I hope it's over. And I think they're fueling the embers of racism.
The racism that exists in the United States today is pale in comparison to the racism that brother dealt with. We have come a long way. We have improved. We still have to remain vigilant, face it, fight it, fix it, wherever it is, but it's not what they said. Here's what you got to understand, what Marxists do. To destroy America, they got to maintain racial strife and want us to forget all the progress that's been made in race relations.
Yes.
That's what's going on.
Yes.
I was on the other side. I'm telling you what they taught me. Read, his name is Manning, M-A-N-N-I-N-G. Manning Johnson. Color, Communism, and Common Sense is the title of the book. Came out in 1950 something. Manning Johnson was a black American. He went to the highest, up in the highest ranks of the Communist Party in the United States. Then he had an epiphany. He said, wait a minute. You're not what I thought you were doing. You want to use black folks. This is Manning Johnson talking now, not KCarl. Manning Johnson in his book said, he called them the Reds. They want to use black folks as pawns to maintain racial strife in America, to bring America down. Manning Johnson said that, who was a communist. That's what they're doing. So what we got to do, we got to become better messengers of liberty to challenge that. Lord have mercy, what's going on in school? They infiltrated our school system. We got to fight on our hands, I'm telling you. I have an 11-year-old son. You get one opportunity to get the education of your child right. So what my brothers and I are doing, we're boycotting. I took my son out of school. We're starting our own school. Woo! Hold up, I got him back.
Thank you for coming this evening. I have a question about the Communist Party. When you're talking about it, I'm familiar with the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, the Republican Party, the Democratic Party. But as far as the Communist Party, I don't think that's a party that we support in this country. So could you?
I don't say we support it, that it exists.
How does that exist as far as in our country? Can you explain that a little bit more?
I mean, look, all you got to do is Google it.
No, I understand Communist Party. I'm just trying to understand how we're talking about the Communist Party.
The Communist Party of the United States.
That you just spoke to. I'd like to hear his answer.
Okay,
I'd like to hear his answer. I didn't come to
What, we're talking about semantics here?
I came to hear you.
Wait, no.
You asked about communism.
No,
I can answer.
I'm not asking about communist, I'm not asking about the communism. I understand communism.
So I said there's a communist party in America that Manning Johnson belonged to. He wrote about the Communist Party of America. Okay? And he explains how it exists. And he explained in his book how it operated. So what I'm telling you is what he said in his book. Read his book. He's clear on what he said. Okay. Manning Johnson, Color, Communism, and Common Sense.
I already got the,
He laid out the playbook.
Okay. So when you're speaking about the Communist Party, you're speaking from his point of view, you're quoting him? I'm
quoting him.
I'm really trying to understand the context.
I'm quoting him.
Okay.
And it's here.
And it's here?
In the United States, it exists.
In the United States?
Yes.
The Communist Party exists.
Yes. Okay.
I understand that. I'm just
I got you.
in the context of like the conversation, how we jumped to it. I feel like someone was talking about coaches, and then we got into communism.
Well, to me, Karl Marx and communism go hand in hand. Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Court.
Yeah, I read.
Go ahead.
Yeah, what about, since the public school system seems to be so compromised, and when you go to board meetings, they just give you the fluoride stare, like you're out of your mind. They don't listen. So, what can
be done?
What can the parents? Okay, so two things. Could the parents that are disenfranchised with the public system withdraw from the public system and, like what you're doing, form their own school? Because it does at this juncture, it doesn't seem like all the parents that are being disenfranchised by the public system have any recourse.
The only recourse I see is to pull out. And we got to continue to fight now because we still got children that's going to be stuck in there. I would say to you, one of the things I know what they're doing out in Florida, how they got some of these questionable child nudity laws in some of these books in the classrooms. In some states, that's a violation of state obscenity laws. Take them to court. Take these superintendents of schools approving this stuff. And some people on the school board don't even know what the heck they're doing. They have no idea. Some are even not even aware. So we have truth on our side. We have justice on our side. We got Frederick Douglass on our side. We got to leverage it. Is there communism in the United States? Yes. Go back and read, Google the 45 Goals of Communism. 1966, I believe, a congressman out of Florida, I can't think of his name, he read into the congressional record the 45 Goals of Communism in the United States. Read it. It is chilling.
Tell her to Google Gus Hall.
Who?
Gus Hall, the communist that ran for president.
Yeah. Now, I got to tell you now, I have some family members who joined the Communist Party back in the 50s. Here's what you got to understand. And the reason why they joined the Communist Party, they saw it as the only dog in the fight to fight racism. You follow me? And when I talked to them over the years, they pulled away from that because things started to improve. These institutional racism, the systematic racism, a lot of that stuff is illegal now. Do we still have racism today? Not as so much as systemic racism. I'm not going to be naive enough to think that some systemic racism doesn't exist. I mean, just look at how the former coach of the Miami Dolphins didn't get an opportunity to interview for a job with the Giants. You know, you got people, you have individual racists in certain places that give the feeling of systemic racism. That's what it is. But we come a long way. We can't let people forget how we've grown and come together. They want to separate us. That's what they're doing. And once they separate us, we're going to be taken over. Look, I appreciate it. I don't want to overstay my welcome. But God bless you. And